Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to episode 149 of SAMA. SAMA is a program where we invite an expert each week, and sometimes two experts a week, like this week, to discuss a topic from their area of expertise. And this week, of course, we have Brad Rothman. He's come to teach us how to use autonomic response testing to help heal ourselves. Now, many of us have health issues. In fact, I go as far as to say most of us have got health issues. Often it is difficult to find the root cause of the problems, and as a result, our quality of life suffers. Now, for over 3 years, we have searched for an expert that can teach us how to discover and resolve health problems using muscle testing techniques. Well, we found one such expert, and that's Brad, who's sitting with us now. And he's going to teach us his healing methods. Now, Brad's not a newcomer to healing methods. He's a founding member of Cornerstone Codes, an alternative health membership association. He has a background in enterprise software development, but his passion is aiding others with their health. He refers to himself as a wellness catalyst. We won't mention what other people refer to him as because it's a family show, but he believes that the body can heal itself, and all that's needed in most cases is a catalyst to help kickstart that process. Brad is a well-respected researcher in the field of frequency transmission, non-linear scanning, and other forms of biofeedback. He has worked with Dr. Jeff Sutherland, Dr. Richard Loyd, and Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, all well-known health experts, and is constantly seeking to self-improve and discover new ways to improve the human condition. So during the SAMA, we will discuss Brad's use of a combination of modalities that will synergistically work together to aid in the determination and mitigation of imbalances in the human body. Brad uses autonomic response testing, or A.R.T. It's an advanced muscle testing technique taught by Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt to evaluate resonances of pathogens, toxins, and psycho-emotional disturbances which cause stress in the body and prevents the body from healing itself. Boy, was that one introduction. Hey Brad, welcome to our show.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure. I'm glad to be with you.
Now, today we're going to give our viewers a treat because it's not just a sit and chat and talk and explain, it's also a show. You're going to show us through example, live, how to apply the ART technique. Now,
Yes.
So have you got a, you mentioned before that you might have something prepared. Do you have a presentation to explain the process of ART?
Yeah, I want to kind of talk about what we're going to do and then look at a more practical side of this.
Great.
Okay, so Dr. Klinghardt, he's a brilliant, he's a medical doctor and practices in, I believe, 3 countries, the United States, the UK, and in Germany.
Yes.
And he kind of splits his time up between those 3 countries, and he's taught me this autonomic response testing. He teaches it to anybody that wants to learn it. If any of you are interested in learning this technique, you can go to Klinghardt Institute. Just look them up and you can get trained to do the same thing.
Right. Okay, so let's throw you into the deep end, shall we? What is ART?
Okay, so ART is autonomic response testing, and the idea is that we're using the body to tell us what's going on inside the body. Muscle testing is not a new phenomenon. It's been around for decades, if not hundreds of years. And we use the body's strength there's subtle changes in the muscle strength to determine what's going on. But I want to kind of just explain a few things first. So one of the ways that we look at the human condition in ART is we acknowledge that there's not just this physical part of us. We have a I want you to just imagine like a food pyramid. Most people know what a food pyramid is, right? The way that we're supposed to eat our food. But if we look at a food pyramid and we've got this triangle with five, and I want you to imagine 5 different levels. Okay, in the bottom level, we have the physical body. And that physical body is everything that we can interact with our 5 senses. So the foods that we eat, medicines that we take, supplements, all of those things work on this physical layer. And so the sciences typically associated with this physical layer are going to be like the mechanics of the structural mechanics of the human body, like bone structure, that type of thing. And then also biochemistry. So all of the chemical reactions that will happen in our bodies. And as far as like diagnostic methods there, you know, there's going to be the physical exam that the doctor would normally perform, anything that the doctor can observe with their 5 senses. And then treatment methods in that layer are going to be things like the biochemical drugs, pharmaceuticals, potentially herbs, supplements. All of these things work on a physical level. Okay, so we talked about the physical body, the physical layer, but there's 5 of these layers, and on the second layer we are looking at the energetic component of the body. So there's the energy body. Now, it's pretty well established that the heart produces a magnetic field that goes out, and it's the strongest magnetic field produced by the body.
Yes.
Well, we know from physics that magnetic fields induce electrical currents and vice versa, right? So you have an electrical current flowing through a wire is going to produce a magnetic field around that wire. And so this layer is everything that has to do with the physics component of our health. So some of the stuff there that we look at, so the sciences are physics and physiology. It's no mistake that physiology sounds like physics. It starts with the same root Latin word. And so diagnostically here on the energy body, we use tools like the EKG, EEGs, thermography even. So that's an infrared imaging type of diagnostic method. MRIs, X-rays, these are all things that work on a physics basis to analyze what's going on inside the body. We can also use muscle testing. It's a very sensitive, energetic tool in order to find out what's going on inside.
Right.
Interestingly, there's over 1,000 documented cases of MRIs picking up what would seem to be like a mass, and then the person will go into surgery, and they look at what's going on. They open a person up, and there's no mass to be found. So that's a strange phenomenon that the MRI is picking up an energetic thing that is not yet manifested into the physical. So it's pretty interesting there. But oftentimes there is a direct association with the physical because of a principle that I'm going to talk about after we talk about these 5 levels. You have any questions so far on that?
No, you're explaining things very clearly, and there's been no questions. But just a reminder to our viewers, if you do have questions, if you've registered online, just type the questions into the chat box, and I can sneak them in whilst Brad's talking. Or if you're watching on Facebook live stream, you can just type the questions underneath the video. But no questions, Brad.
Okay. So just put your hand up or whatever if you need to interrupt me. Otherwise, I'll just keep. Okay, so we talked about the physical body. We talked about the energy body. Now we talk about the 3rd level, which is the mental body. The mental body is everything that is comprised of our learning, any traumas that we've experienced, any type of mental stressors. These are all things that affect our mental body. Diagnostically, we use the tools typically of like a psychiatrist or counseling, something like that. And then treatments, kind of the same, a lot of this talk therapy. And what we find is that it's not very effective, especially when people are like a psychiatrist is, they may find some or label a disorder and then give a pharmaceutical drug. Well, the problem is that this drug that works on a biochemical basis,
Yes.
which is the first level.
Mm.
And so you have this third level imbalance, and you're trying to fix it with first level solution, and it doesn't work very well. So you have all the side effects, and never really gets rid of the problem, the real problem. It might mask it. Unfortunately, that's the way most pharmaceuticals work, but it doesn't actually address the real issue. And so we can use muscle testing at level 2, both for looking at what's going on and for as a therapy. So the therapies they're typically referred to, the ones that I use with muscle testing are called applied psychokinesiology, psychoneurobiology, sorry, and mental field technique. So these are both things that are also taught by Dr. Klinghardt. He kind of pieced a lot of these things from other more brilliant people and put them all together into a system that's really well taught and easy to learn.
Yes.
So the fourth level that we look at is what we call the intuitive body. And this is where things get a little bit weird because it's much more abstract. So this is where like your family dynamics play in, core belief system that you have, things that are really deeply ingrained in you. And this is kind of the realm of symbols and numbers and interpretation of strange things like that, that may mean one thing to one person and totally a different thing to another person. And as far as a therapy in this, they're really, it's more, it's difficult to put a finger on because it is such an abstract thing. In this fourth layer, the really language is not even present. The only thing that is present here is numbers, which are completely universal to all languages. But there are some types of therapy that can kind of break into this realm or this level, and that's would be on like using art, certain types of art, if it's a free form type of expression of art that way. But one of the other things that you can do to create some deep healing on this level are going to be things like reestablishing connections with estranged family members or, people that you've had issues with in the past. And then on the fifth level is the level of the spirit. And this is really this very individual. It is your connection with God. But there's really no therapy per se, because this is something that is so individual. It's between you and God. And scripture talks about how we're supposed to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. And it's a very personal thing. So I don't interject any type of therapy on this level. So that is the 5 different levels: the physical, energetic, mental, intuitive, and the spirit. And there's this really important principle that we have to understand, is that anytime you have an imbalance on any of these upper layers, what tends to happen, we have this principle of downward causation, which causes, just like gravity, this issue to come down, and the bottom layer is the physical. So it will manifest physically at some point. And this is really important because it's estimated that about 80% of issues really originate in these upper layers. So Western medicine, where they really look at things more from the physical layer, that's great for when you chop your arm off, right? There's no amount of energetic stuff that can sew your arm back on. You have to go to the ER and get that dealt with in a physical way.
Right.
But when you're stressed at work, and that cause, which would be like a third level mental stress if it was a stress from work, then you end up having this heart attack, which is a physical symptom because this downward causation. So a third level issue caused a physical manifestation because it wasn't dealt with, right? So we can have any imbalance on any of the upper layers can manifest that way. A trauma from childhood, which could be somewhere between the third or fourth levels, that can manifest physically later in all kinds of different ways, right? So it's important to treat the issue on the level that the issue originates in. So it's very ineffective to try and treat a mental problem with a biochemical drug. So that's how I approach and look at the human condition with those 5 levels in mind. And when we're diagnosing somebody or looking at what's going on with them, we look at which level are these stressors coming from.
Right. There's a question now. I'll just quickly say, Nola, your question was for yesterday's Sama, not for Brad's one. And Richard Sherwood asks, is diminished hearing only a physical issue? And from what you're saying, or are there testing corrective actions on any level that you can do to correct hearing loss?
So really, any imbalance on any of the upper layers could manifest physically. We can't look at the physical and say, oh yeah, this is caused by a level of problem on this level.
Right.
We have to do the testing. What we can do, and I'll demonstrate, as we're muscle testing, we can put points of reference into the equation. And thereby we can create correlations between hearing loss and something else. And we can test different things to see, is this more of an emotional issue that's causing this? Is this a mental stress, or is this some type of toxicity, right? So if the nerves are damaged because mercury's in the system and it's eating away at the nerves, well, that's a very physical thing. But
absolutely,
if there's some other type of thing from the past on another layer, we just have to do the testing. There's no way to look at it and just be able to tell you. That's why the testing is important, because it helps us look at the physical condition, which, the only reason somebody's ever getting tested is because they have some physical symptom usually. And so the testing is, how do we find out what is causing that physical symptom? So right. we'll get to that in the demo.
Okay, wonderful.
All right, so another thing that I want to talk to you about, which is really important with autonomic response testing, that is the topic of light. Now, scripture refers to God as the light of this world, and that personally I believe that we as humans are created in God's image. But putting belief aside, it is proven, biophysics has proven that our healthy cells emit light. And the light that's emitted by our cells is a coherent light. It's polarized. And it comes out in these vertical sheets, like in the sagittal plane. So, which means that it kind of comes out, it's pointing toward the axis of your body. So there's the axis from the top to the bottom. The planes of the sheets of light that come out are always pointing toward that axis in every direction. And this has been discovered and published by a very well published biophysicist. His name is Fritz Albert Popp. So the reason why this light emission from the body is important is because we know light it's a bidirectional carrier of information. So we know that, for instance, good examples of that would be like fiber optics, even like a simple barcode scanner at a grocery store, right? So it's sending light out, it reads a barcode, and that information travels back into the machine carried on that beam of light. Again, fiber optics is transferring information. Now the body is no different. When it emits light, it's carrying information on that light. It's estimated that one photon of light can carry more information than is contained in all of the libraries of the world. So there's a tremendous amount of bandwidth that light has to be able to carry information. And so when the light is coming out of the body, like I said, healthy cells produce coherent light or polarized light. Unhealthy cells do not. So when the body loses the ability to polarize light, it does that well before physical symptoms start manifesting. It's an energetic thing. So it's a very sensitive way to be able to measure the health of a tissue without, that may not even be symptomatic yet. So it's very sensitive in that regard. We can garner information from the body using this light to be able to do that. But we can also use this light to put information into the body. And so when we put, I use a device called a signal enhancer, which I'll show later. It's a clear plastic block. And when we put a substance on to this signal enhancer, that is funneled into the body, and the body behaves just as if it were to take that. So we can test different remedies, we can test different stressors, and the body will respond as if that same thing is present in the body. And so we can get an external response without having to shove a whole bunch of different remedies down a person's throat just to see if they would work or not. So we can test that externally to get that same information.
Right.
So one of the interesting things is that when we use the polarization, we use a polarization filter, which is what you would see on the front of a camera to reduce glare, usually is what that's used for. But we use it in a different sense. This is a linear polarization filter, which basically is a camera filter with like about 200,000 metal rods in it. They're invisible to the human naked eye, but you can, if you look under a microscope, you can see all these that are in the vertical plane. And what that does is it only allows polarized light to come through in one direction. So if we were to turn that sideways, and if light is coming out this way, but we turn the filter so that the rods are kind of across, it blocks all light from passing through until you turn the filter vertical. And that allows the light to go through. And so we use this to determine, is the body emitting this coherent light? Because when, as a whole, the body is healthy, it should be emitting this coherent light in that polarized way. And interestingly, when we have the polarization filter on the signal enhancer head, ambient room light passes through the filter into the signal enhancer, and that interacts with the body. Now, the cool thing there is that the body likes this, and it's profoundly relaxing to the body. And so what we see is there's immediately a change in muscle strength, is what should happen. But this is not always the case, and so that's when we start talking about regulation of the nervous system. So the nervous system has three parts: sympathetic, parasympathetic, and the enteric nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is what's responsible for all of the subconscious parts of the body. So heartbeat, breathing, healing. This is primarily active during nighttime or sleep. is when the parasympathetic nervous system is dominant. At least it should be. With all these external stressors, that's less and less the case, which is a big problem. But the other side of this is the sympathetic nervous system. That is what keeps us awake and alert and aware of our surroundings. It is what helps us. If the tiger came into the room, that's what's going to get blood pumping to the muscles so that we can get out of there fast, right? So sympathetic nervous system is involved with your immediate survival. Parasympathetic nervous system is more like the important healing processes, which may not be as important when you have a tiger in the room. And then you have the enteric nervous system, which is really an entirely separate nervous system on its own that communicates with the brain via the vagus nerve, which only has a few threads, and that's a whole another discussion. But for this, we really focus on the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. Now, when those systems are working properly, we have what's called open regulation. And regulation can really be defined about as how well your body adapts to the external environment, external stressors. How does your body deal with that? So say, for instance, you were thrown off of a boat into some freezing cold water. What is supposed to happen is your nervous system is supposed to recognize that external force on your body, freezing cold water. And what's supposed to happen is then your nervous system would cut blood supply to your hands and your feet to preserve that heat to the core. Now, depending on how open the regulation is, determines how efficiently that process happens. So if you have blocked regulation, that will happen a lot slower than it would if you had open regulation. And in that case, those minutes count. So it's not like circulation's cut off immediately. It's a process where it starts to decrease over time. And that could happen quicker, which is preferable in this case, or slower, which is obviously not. So open regulation is just that, your body's ability to adapt to an external environment. And we use the polarization filter to check the state of regulation in the body. When you put the pull filter above the head, the expectation is that the body is able to react to that and respond to that external stimulus and should go into a very relaxed state. If we don't see that, that's a problem, and that's where most of sessions start, is with finding out how do we open up that regulation so that the nervous system's operating better in a less stressed state.
Right.
Does that make sense so far?
It does. It's quite a lot of information to explain. I'm hoping that the demonstration will help to clarify and make things a little bit more easier to understand.
Sure. Okay, so when we start using muscle testing, we're using the phenomenon of subtle changes in the muscle strength. And we test different stimuli on the body. So we'll take something that may be healing, something that may be a stressor, and we see how the body responds, right? So the body is like a binary computer. Either a muscle is going to be strong or it's going to be weak. It's going to be on or off, just like binary. And so the real art of muscle testing really has to do with how we interpret the strength of the muscle. So like in classical muscle testing systems, like applied kinesiology is one of those systems, have interpretation of muscle strength. And in my opinion, it's a little bit of a mature interpretation. In a lot of those schools of thought, a weak muscle is bad, period. But I want you to kind of hypothetically put yourself into a hot tub. And I want you to imagine you're just kind of chilling out there for like 45 minutes. Now, when you come out of that hot tub, are you going to feel strong Of course not. You're gonna feel kind of like Jello, right? I mean, it's just gonna flop. And that type of weakness is a very beneficial, healing, relaxed state.
Mm.
It's called a Yin state, and in that state, it's almost like the ideal healing state. But if you felt that same way getting out of bed, that's a different story, right? You're supposed to feel well rested. You should have lots of energy when you get up. I mean, everybody has some time that they wake up, but if you have no energy and you're feeling like Jello when you get out of bed, that's a problem.
Right.
So when we see a weak muscle, the art is really interpreting, is this a good type of weak muscle or is this a bad type of weak muscle? And obviously, one we want to keep, one we don't want. And so what we'll see is different stimuli will induce those different states with the muscle testing. So when we first start a session, we always start with the pull filter. Let me actually grab it.
Let's get I'll ask your question later, Bev.
So this is the signal enhancer with the polarization filter on it.
Right.
The polarization filter is this, and again, this has got the 200,000 vertical lines that come through and only allow light to pass through in one direction. This is a signal enhancer, and the signal enhancer is a perfectly crystalline structure inside of it. Every molecule is equal distance away from the others. And crystals, just the nature of crystals is they have the ability to transmit and convert information. So we would obviously not have a lot of the technology that we have today if it were not for crystals. And so we use the properties of some of the crystals to transmit light and other information carried on it through it. And this block amplifies and enhances that signal. So when we start a session, we start with this device above the head. So it would be kind of like here. Because what's important about the light emission of the body, as it goes out, it also comes back in and it forms somewhat like a shape like an apple. So if you think about an apple, you cut it in half and you can see the core is its axis, right? But into the core, there's this all the way around, it comes back into the axis. And so this point above the head really is a point where all of the information carried on all of the light going all the way around the body converges into the top of the head and also the bottom of the feet. And so at that spot, we can capture all of the information about every single process going on inside the body. And by having the signal enhancer there, we're amplifying that so that we can see it more clearly. Okay. But when we start a session, we, like I said, we start with this pull filter on, and the expectation, because the light coming through the polarization filter from the ambient light interacting with the light of the body, it should put the body into a very relaxed state. If we do not see that, there's a problem. So the arm should be weak in this state because it should be kind of like the hot tub. You should be relaxed and kind of not necessarily jello-y, but your system responds that way. And so when we start, if the muscle is strong, that would indicate that it's kind of uptight. Your nervous system is uptight, regulation is not open, and then the process of finding what needs to happen in order to open this regulation. So once we do that, we'll go through a process. We test all of the organs, we test different stressors, we test different remedies, and find what are the things that need to be done in order to get regulation as wide open as possible. That means that the nervous system is able to interact with anything you throw at it. Hopefully, it's able to deal with that. Instead of putting up a wall, I kind of think of closed regulation as the body putting up a wall, like trying to keep things out because it just can't deal with it. It's like, can't deal with it. And so it tries to keep things out, but it also prevents healing processes from completing in the body. Is that making sense so far?
Yes.
All right. So after we test and ensure regulation is open, we will basically do the whole process again. And we do that with no stimuli. So we'll take the pull filter off, and then the expectation with no stimuli is that just the natural state, right? You should have a strong arm. Now, when the arm is strong with no stimuli, that is expected. But if we put some type of point of reference into the equation by either touching a tissue or testing a toxin, these things may or may not cause that arm to go weak. Now, if that arm does go weak, this is where that interpretation is so vitally important. It could be the really healing type of weak, or it could also be the bad type of weak. So we have to learn to distinguish that. Some of that is logical, like if you put mercury on there and it goes weak, then no one is deficient in mercury. So we can interpret that way. But there are other ways to really, if it's kind of borderline, we can distinguish using different ways, touching the vagus nerve. If that changes the way that the muscle responds, that would indicate that there's something bad for you. So one of the other things that we do that's really different with this system of muscle testing is we use the body's weight to maintain a consistent pressure on the muscle, which becomes really important because otherwise, if you have a preconceived notion, you could be subconsciously even exerting more pressure onto the muscle because you think it should be one way or another. And that's part of the problem with a lot of the earlier schools of thought in muscle testing. It should be this way, and therefore it's made to happen. And it's not a truly physiological test at that point. So it's important to keep pressure consistent. We do that by using the body's weight and leaning into the muscle that we're testing. That way, my weight might fluctuate from day to day, but it's not fluctuate between test and test. And so that's why that's an important factor.
Okay.
So those are the main things that I wanted to explain. If there's something else that comes up, I'll kind of stop it. I'm thinking this point would be a good time to transition to a demonstration.
Wonderful.
Do you have any questions at this point?
I've got a few questions I'd like to ask. Now, let's have a look. Now, Bev's, one of her questions was, can you tell if the energy which is in the body is created by the body or that came from external, through an external energy source?
Well, to a certain extent, all energy in the body is really from an external source, right? I mean, everything, if you look down at the quantum level, everything is made up of atoms, and atoms are comprised of protons and electrons. And if you think about the food that you eat over a lifetime, those are made up of matter. And so you put that into your body, and the body then grows using that. And so from that point of view, all energy is external.
Right.
It's kind of incorporated, but yeah, I mean, we can test to see if there are stressors like electromagnetic radiation. That's a really common stressor. And we can tell whether those types of energies are creating an influence in the human condition. So we can see if that's a stressor or a part of the equation when we're looking at a certain type of symptom or whatever. I don't know if that fully answers your question, Brad.
It does. Richard, I'll ask your question at the end of the summer. Bev is asking about plants. If you can Or I guess you can't see the light coming off plants, animals, and water, but the energy, can you use?
So all biological systems emit light. Also proven by Professor Fritz Albert Popp. He's done some pretty interesting experiments there where a grain has been poisoned. And what happens is it begins to emit tremendously more light as it's dying. And as that light leaves, so does the plant die. And so it's interesting that there's this massive burst of light, if you will, as something goes into the process of death. But just in a normal sense, without being poisoned, yes, there's a continual emission of light. There's a guy from, I think he was doing some experiments in the 70s. I think his name was Cleve Baxter, doing experiments with plants. And some really fascinating stuff there. Non-physical interactions that he had with plants that were recorded on lie detector machine.
The plant behind you is looking very healthy. You obviously applied some sort of relaxation techniques to it. Okay, well, we'll go
to the scalar field all the time.
Okay, well, we'll go to the demonstration and see it in action, shall we?
Very good. Let me get set up here.
Sure. Now, the question that you are asking, Richard, with regards, you take over, Brad. I was filling in while you were getting ready. Now you go ahead.
Okay. So this is Tina.
Hi, Tina.
Okay, so what this looks like, we're going to start with the signal enhancer, pull filters on, and actually before that, let me take this off. We're going to use the right arm. Let's go ahead and put that up. And I'm just going to calibrate against her strength. So I'm just going to lean into her arm, resist, hold. Again. Okay, so she's giving me some feedback. She's resisting my pressure as I lean into it. And you notice that the arm doesn't give. So we're going to put this polarization filter on here. This should put the body into a very relaxed state. And that should manifest as a weak arm. Hold. Hold. Yet it's not. And so that would indicate that her nervous system is stressed. We need to find what needs to happen to open this regulation up. Her nervous system should be responding, but it's not. It's got this wall up. And so we're going to test a few different things. One of the first things that I test are some acupuncture points. So go ahead and hold. So these are just the meridians of the body. And right here on the conception vessel, we find there's a dramatic change in the strength of the muscle. So hold. And then as soon as I make contact with the conception vessel, this arm goes it's floppy. She can't resist as hard as you can. It's just not there. There's no strength. And so that would indicate that there is an imbalance in the conception vessel. And so that's one of the things that we will look at in addressing whatever's going on with her. And at this point, we're looking at the system as a whole. We haven't discussed symptoms. I'm not really interested in that at this point. I want to know, as a whole, what is her body? How is it responding? And so conception vessel is another thing. So we're not going to open up a regulation just yet. I'm not going to fix the problem because by doing that, we lose the ability to find new problems. So go ahead and hold. Okay, so we've got a strong arm. It's uptight. So we're going to look at, let's look at some common toxins. So let's test, for instance, let's test aluminum, see if that's a factor. Okay, so when we put aluminum onto the signal enhancer, that creates no change in the muscle strength. Strong. And because the body is like a binary computer, this is interpreted to mean that there's no correlation between the stress state and aluminum. So let's test lead. No change. Let's test mercury. Oh, it's dramatic. There's no strength in this arm. And the way that that is interpreted is to say that mercury is having a profound impact on her nervous system because it is changing the way that her regulation works. It's a very strange phenomenon, but both the toxin, the solution, the remedy will make this change. So one of the best remedies that you can do for any type of heavy metal poisoning is going to be cilantro and a combination of cilantro and relic. So let's just see if what that does when we use that. Okay, so I've got a little vial of cilantro tincture. Creates the same change. Without cilantro, you strengthen this arm. If we put the chlorella on the gut, which is where it has its primary action, it's a binder. It binds toxins. That's why it's super important as far as getting metals out of the body. Well, it does not have an action of it does not get rid of the stress of the mercury, but what will happen when the cilantro is in the mix, it will bind any mercury that is put into the gut. So mercury is part of this equation in TINA. So we're going to continue to look for more problems. So open up regulation until we've found as many problems as we can find. Go ahead and hold. So we're still uptight. Now, these are some slides, high definition slides of different pathogens. So these are mostly Lyme pathogens, Lyme and Lyme co-infections. So we got Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia, Chlamydia pneumoniae, a bunch of these different Lyme co-infections. And the way that this works, when we put one of these onto the signal enhancer, it's interesting. You can rest your arm. You know, just as you can understand, or you can, if you're on a phone with somebody familiar, even though you may not be able to see their face, based on their voice, you can recognize them, right? So just in the same way, the light that is emitted from an organism, our bodies recognize that. If that organism may be present and already causing a stress, we're essentially exaggerating the stress. Whereas if it's not present, the body is able to adapt to that. But if there's a chronic infection, it's already established that the body is not able to get rid of that infection, and that's why it's present, right? So by putting something that's already present in the body, exaggerating the stress, we can see if there's a correlation. So I can test these in multiples here. Go ahead and put your arm up. Hold. Okay, so there's strength there, which means there's no correlation with these four that I tested, which are Borrelia, Chlamydia, Rickettsia, and Bartonella. Test a few more at the bottom here. No correlation. And we see the change. But I've tested 3 of these at the same time, these 3. So now I can test them one at a time. Okay, it's real obvious when you hit something like this. So this is Ehrlichia. Ehrlichia is a common Lyme co-infection. And so at this point, what I'll typically do is we found an issue, right? So we got some nasty bug. We want to find things that may get rid of this. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to open up regulation. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to do some tapping on the top lip. As you make a toning sound, that toning sound activates the parasympathetic nervous system. While tapping, it is giving a complex instruction to the nervous system. So go ahead and just do the tapping on your top lip. Make a sound. Keep doing that for a couple seconds. Okay, should be good. Okay, arm up and hold. And hold. Okay, so there's now weakness. Regulation is open. So now when we put, so this is essentially the opposite, right? I had been applying pressure. I've got this cilantro tincture on the signal enhancer now. And so this creates the change that what we were expecting to start, that the nervous system would be in a relaxed state, which it is now. Hold. Okay, so it's hot tub mode, okay? Now we're gonna put this stressor on, which is a pathogen, and hold. Now it flips from the relaxed state into stressed state, which is what it was before. So to determine if a remedy would fix this pathogen, we need to test different things. So we can test, one of my favorites is an ozonated oil called Rhizol. So we're going to see if that creates basically what we're checking for is whether it would cancel the weight for the resonance of this organism. Go ahead and hold. So we got stress. We're going to put Rhizol in here. Hold. Rhizol's not doing it. There's a combination of herbs, which I use, a product called Kivita, which is amazing for most Lyme things. Go ahead and hold. Okay, so now we get the weak arm back. So this would be interpreted to say that the stress caused by this organism is canceled out by the remedy. But of course, we're users of spooky. So we can also use frequency. And that is where this really gets interesting. So I'm going to leave this slide of the Ehrlichia on the signal enhancer, which puts the body into a stressed state. Now I'm going to use frequency. So I've got Tina's DNA in a generator, and we're going to see if we can find something that would, hold on, Grace, let me do this. Let me do this. So we're going to look for sorry, one second. Yeah, let me have somebody switch so that you can see what I'm doing on Spooky. Very good. Does that look okay? Can you guys see Spooky and me in the background?
Yes, yes. It's most of the picture is you with a bit of Spooky in the background.
Okay, good. So we're going to look for Ehrlichia. Did I misspell it? Okay, and in this case, it's actually Ehrlichia equi, which is from a horse. So we're going to use this. I don't see. We don't have the DNA frequencies, which definitely is my go-to if we have them. So we have a list of 19 frequencies here, right? So we can start transmitting these. If it will go. There you go. Okay, so we got 1.19 hertz coming out. We're going to test to see if this frequency cancels out the stress of this organism. Well, it does not. So this strong arm is interpreted as uptight nervous system right now. So we're going to basically go through all of these frequencies until we find something that causes the stress of this organism to be reduced. Hold. 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 And all I'm doing right now is I'm hoping you guys can see the frequency on out 1 and out 2 is being changed as I drop these. Okay, so here at 469.69, we find a frequency that reduces or removes or cancels out the stress from this organism. So if I go back up to 406, strong arm. 354, strong arm. 469.69 goes weak. It's real obvious. And we can continue searching. So 590, 637, 698, 939, 1180, 1223, 1416. Just keep going. See if there's anything else that's going to. Okay, so we went through 19 frequencies, and one of these reduced the stress. Now, if you were to play this program, right, that's going to take 57 minutes, but only 3 minutes of that 57 minutes is going to have any effect on the nervous system. So why run a program with 19 frequencies when 18 of them are not accomplishing at least anything that I can detect? So what this allows us to do is to really optimize the program so that you're only using the frequencies that work. So we can notate this 469.69. Let's write that down so that we can make sure that she gets that. Then let me demonstrate something else here with frequency. So we know that mercury is an issue. So let's put Ehrlichia away. We know that mercury is an issue. Okay, so this mercury that is not being detected as a stress because we have the thing that takes resonance with the body on the signal enhancer. Okay, so right now goes back into the stress state because we've taken the remedy for it out. But what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we could also look at mercury as frequency, something to get rid of it. So if we look for So I've got some custom programs that I use, my favorites. So there's 6 different isotopes of mercury. And we want to find out which one of these may be present or causing the primary stress. So we can go ahead and hold. So this frequency, this isotope, mercury 198, is not a factor in her case. Hold. Okay, so mercury 199 is an issue. It is a factor for her. Mercury 200, not an issue. Mercury 202, not an issue. 201 and 204. So 204 and 199 are both isotopes that are causing a stress on her body, but we need not run the other frequencies because they would have no effect, essentially, at least from what I can detect. Okay, so we're going to take mercury out of here. I'm going to put the solution back on here. And we're going to test some other organisms. So in A.R.T, you know, we have a lot of different remedies that we test for different things, a lot of different tools. One of those tools is the use of the CDs, and the CDs contain the sound of different organisms. Interestingly, don't ask me how it works. I've proven it over and over to myself and others that these signal enhancers with their crystalline form are able to convert information from the digital information of the sound of these organisms written onto a CD into something that the body understands. The mechanics of it, I don't know. I wish I did, but you know, I also don't understand how my cell phone works when I make a call. But I know that when I hit dial, something happens and it works, right? So even though I don't understand the mechanics of it, it's easy enough to prove or disprove that it works. So we're going to test different things here. So these are the signatures of retroviruses. It's not an, so retrovirus is an issue. So we're going to test a different, unfortunately, when it gets to these CDs, I don't always have the means to determine what organism it is, but what I can do is use a remedy which is designed for retroviruses. Oh, okay, that reduces the stress or eliminates the stress of the retrovirus. I'm going to test, this is signatures of different fungi. Not an issue, the body is in a relaxed state. More fungi, relaxed. Some bacteria, not causing a stress in the nervous system. More bacteria, not an issue. Okay, these are some parasites. Okay, real clear difference. Strong as a rock right now. And so now we need to find out what this is. And so I have two ways to do that. When I take this off, remember the arm is in a weak state, body is relaxed. So what I have these, each of these is different tracks. Oh, where's my phone at? One second. So I can take the tracks, which I've digitized, and we can test each track individually to see which of these parasites may be in play here. So we'll just kind of start somewhere in the middle here. So I'm just playing the sound, which would be like the body recognizing a familiar voice. So we're playing the sound. And we do not have any of these CDs on anything. It's just purely coming in through her ears, seeing if this causes stress. No stress from this organism, which is tapeworm. This is the eggs of a tapeworm. This is a Trichinella spiralis. All of these so far are not causing a stress. Okay, so now we've found one, Toxoplasma gondii. This is causing a stress response in her arm, and the sound is the only stimulus that's being put there. We pause the sound, goes back into a relaxed state. So we now have a parasite, which we have found a correlation with. So let's see if we can find that again. Okay, so we have this parasite. We can leave this here. It doesn't have to have the sound playing the whole time as a point of reference. So the body recognizes this as a stress, which is making this arm strong. Now we could test different remedies against it. We could test, so one of my favorite natural anti-parasite type of remedies is going to be pine gum spirits, turpentine. It's essentially the essential oil of the pine tree. Let's see if that reduces the stress. No, still stressed. Okay, the other one that I like to use is called Ivermectin. I believe somebody on a previous SAMA talked about Ivermectin. That is something that could be potentially useful. Okay, that removes the stress from this muscle. So that would indicate that Ivermectin would be a useful treatment for this type of parasite, Toxoplasma gondii.
Yes, it's a broad spectrum anti-parasitic drug.
It is. That's why it's in my test kit, because it's one of the go-tos that when we don't know what type of parasite it is. So Ivermectin, it seems to be effective. Now, what we could theoretically do, right? We have molecular weight frequencies, so we could potentially look at using the frequency of an ivermectin. Whoopsie. Clear out this program. So we have the stress caused by the signature of this pathogen. And we're going to see if either of these two forms of ivermectin reduce that. Not that one. Okay, so this would be interpreted as to mean that the frequency of this ivermectin could be taken in place of the true ivermectin, which would require pharmaceutical or a medical doctor license to be able to prescribe, right? But we can use the frequency of ivermectin to emit it to her body, which would have, it would also reduce this or remove the stress caused by this pathogen. So that becomes really practical. You can, any known compound, you can transmit the frequency for that if you know it's going to work, right? You can't just guess, or you could, but it's going to, you're going to end up with really inefficient programs. So let's see if there is, is there any questions at this point?
There are, but I just want to keep the flow of the demonstration going, and I'll ask the questions at the end.
Okay. So we're going to leave ivermectin in the mix because we know that that's effective. It's just convenient for me to have it as a little vial. And then we'll just kind of proceed with the check. So, okay, so we got open regulation, which is good. It's what we're wanting because the pull filter is still on. And now what we're going to do is we're going to check for switching, which switching is confusion in the body. So we need to check to make sure that we have the most clear signal possible. This is the way that we check for switching. Go ahead and hold. And immediately the arm becomes strong again. This would indicate that this is a stress. So open regulation, touching pinky and thumb tips together. That is a stressed state. So at this point, we want to ask the question, well, let's check the other hand too. Okay, so it's only on one side that we're seeing the stress when holding the pinky and thumb tips together. Go ahead and let go of that. And go ahead and hold these ones again. And we're basically gonna, when some switching is on one side of the body, typically associated with scars, a hot tooth, something like that. So we would ask if there's anything bothering you. Teeth, an issue? Any pain on one side? Is there any scarring?
Loose tooth. I mean, no teeth on this side.
Okay, go ahead and just hold that there. Okay, let go of the oh. It's okay. Let go of the cheek and hold. So there's stress, but as soon as we bring the tooth into the equation, just by touching it, the nervous system, very sensitive, it cancels that out. So it means that there's a problem. Something in the teeth is causing confusion in the body is the way that that's interpreted. So we're going to fix that real quick. Go ahead and hold this. You can put this arm down. I'm going to just go ahead and lift your head slightly. This is a and just go jello on me. This is a technique called injury recall technique. And it just, we're leveraging the touch of the body and then this flexion movement, it erases muscle memory, really is what it's doing. It's erasing any muscle memory so that the body basically forgets about any previous injury to that location. Go ahead and rest. And you can put this arm to your side and pinky and thumb up and hold. Say that again. Okay, so that stress seems to be still a little bit, it's not all the way, there's a gradient. Go ahead and hold. I can still perceive there's some strength there. Let me see if there's still, I think we may need to keep doing that. Go ahead and put this hand, touch the cheek again, lift your head up again. I could just feel that there was a little bit of resistance there, so I was making sure that this is properly all the way cleared out. Go ahead and rest. And this arm up, and pinky and thumb, and hold. Okay, much less resistance means the nervous system now wide open regulation. This is not, we've eliminated the confusion in the body. So now we're going to test different organs. We're going to check the brain. 3 different parts. Check the sinuses. Check the top teeth, bottom teeth. Check the lungs. Check the thyroid, the emotional heart, the physical heart. We're going to check the liver, gallbladder, stomach, pancreas, spleen, small intestine. You're resting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Small intestine, large intestine, large intestine. Try a little harder there. The pelvic floor, and the kidneys. Okay, so you notice that every one of those organs that I tested, the arm was weak, which is actually in the relaxed state, which means in general, all of these organs are not under stress, at least at this level. So then what we can do is we can look at the different distances away from the body. I said that the body emits light, and on that light is carried all of the information about what's going on inside the body. And what's been found is that at different distances away from the body, we're looking at different parts of inside the body. So at about 18 inches away, we're looking at the space around the cells, so the interstitial fluid. That is about 18 inches away, that's what we're looking at. About 3 feet away, we're looking at inside the cell, so we're looking at intracellular activity. So I use some mirrors to do this. We're basically reflecting the light of the body back to itself, which it will, if that light is not coherent, which would not happen, which would be happening if there's unhealthy tissues. There's going to be this distorted light being reflected back to the body, which is displeasing, and that would cause stress. So we're going to go ahead and hold. 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 Okay, so when the mirror is reflecting the light of the front of her head back to her, there's this stress. One more time. Okay, so it's real obvious. And so what we need to do is find something that's going to eliminate the stress. Now, this is where there's a lot of learning that has to happen in order to know how to do this. But when we are looking at extracellular, and in the brain is the context of what's going on here. It's the front of the head. And so we have something that is causing a stress there. Now, one of the things that I want to look at is, well, one of the main ways that we can detoxify the brain is melatonin. Melatonin is the main way that the brain detoxifies. It's produced by the pineal gland, and it's supposed to be activated in darkness. The problem is that more and more of us are getting berated from all sides. This gland is under attack. It's affected severely by aluminum, by glyphosate, which is in all non-organic food, and sprayed in the air, we're breathing it. Fluoride, which calcifies the gland, that's commonly found in toothpastes. And then the other thing that's really affects the pineal gland is going to be electromagnetic radiation. So, and we can't escape that unless you're living in a Faraday cage, right? Which no one is. So we have to find other ways around to support this gland. So one of the first things I look at when looking at brain toxicity is what is melatonin going to do? So we could take a vial of melatonin and see if that changes the test. It does. So we take that off. Melatonin is not in the picture, and there's this stress state. But as soon as melatonin gets put into the equation, body's relaxed. It's really quick and easy to test these things this way. We don't have to actually take it and wait for it to have an effect. By putting it on the signal enhancer, the body responds immediately. And so let's continue with the testing. We can see if, okay, now we're going 3 feet away. We're looking inside the cells now. And again, this weak arm is indicating that the body is relaxed. Anytime this flips is when we're concerned at this level. Okay, so overall, it was mainly just the brain, extracellular space needed some support to help detoxify. But all of the other organs seemed like they were okay. And that may have something to do with melatonin being in the equation, because melatonin does not only have an effect on the brain, but on every organ of the body. It's well established, published in medical literature, 10 milligrams of melatonin a day will prevent cancer. 40 milligrams a day will stop the metastasis of most cancers. But on the note of melatonin, very important, the melatonin is produced in the brain by the pineal gland. Now, when that is happening, as it should, it leaves the brain and goes into the body, but the brain has got the blood-brain barrier, and it works like a one-way valve. So when you take a normal melatonin capsule or tablet, what's going to happen is it's going to go into the gut, and it's going to be absorbed and start floating around the blood. But when it gets to the blood-brain barrier, it does not allow it to go through, because melatonin is produced in the brain and comes out. It's not designed to go back in. And so we have to, in order to detoxify the brain, we need the melatonin, but we also have to package it up in a Trojan horse, essentially. And so what that is liposomes. Liposomes are like a sphere of fat, and you can put a payload inside that sphere of fat, and that will readily be accepted into the brain, and the melatonin can have its action there. So liposomal melatonin is an amazing thing to help brain. So now we have all of the organs with these remedies, melatonin. We got an herbal concoction for Lyme stuff, which is what we're working on there, Lichia, which we could use frequencies also. Typically, I'll use both. I love to use frequency and supplements, because anytime you're attacking the problem from multiple directions, just increases your chances of success. We've got cilantro in here. And so with all of these things, along with any frequencies, which are not playing, her nervous system is relaxed. And so now, at this point, we would do this whole process again without the pull filter. And what you'll notice is that this flips. So now she's got strength in her arm, which before we interpreted as stress. But without the polarization filter, this no longer is interpreted as stress. This is just your innate normal strength that you should have. And so now the interpretation gets flipped. If we put something on here and it causes the arm to go weak, that is interpreted as a stress. So we're going to recheck all of the organs. Sinus, teeth. So teeth are an issue. Both top and bottom teeth are an issue. lungs, thyroid, emotional heart, the physical heart, liver, gallbladder, stomach, pancreas, spleen, small intestine, large intestine, pelvic floor, and kidney. Okay, so out of those organs, teeth were the thing that showed up, and oftentimes we'll find multiple things showing up, right? So teeth, that's a stressor. So now we can look at different things that may relieve that stress. So one of the things that I like to use for teeth is MSM. So we can use a few capsules of MSM to see if that has an effect on or cancels out that stress. Okay, so now she's got strength where it was not there before. If you take these MSM out of the equation, we're touching the teeth, it's weak. So this is a stress state canceled out by the MSM. So that would be a good thing for you to take. Theoretically, we could do the same thing that we did with the ivermectin. We could find the frequency for MSM and transmit that wireless through the remotes or plasma or however you want to transmit it and get that benefit that way. So I think that this has basically demonstrated most of the different things that I would do. We haven't really touched on much of the psycho-emotional stuff. The tapping is actually inadvertently addressing a psychological thing. So the tapping that you did in the very beginning, that is addressing something psychological. We don't necessarily, we haven't we haven't gone into that, figured out what that is, but just doing tapping 4 times a day for 6 weeks will resolve that, the underlying cause of that. But we can, at this point, you know, toward the end of the session, I usually do a lot of psycho-emotional type of work. So we can look to see if, go ahead and put your arm up. We're not going to go here because this usually ends up in crying and snot, which I won't do for Tina's sake. But go ahead and hold. So we got a weak arm, which is the pull filter's on, so she's relaxed. Go ahead and put, without moving your head, move your eyes all the way to the right. Hold. Move them all the way to the left. Look down. Try again. And look hard up. Okay, so here, when she looks up, the strength of her muscle changes. And what this is interpreted to mean is that there is some type of a psychological trauma that's occurred that is very deep. When the vertical movements of the eye changes the muscle strength, that is a trauma that is not yet ready. It's not at the surface. It's not ready to be worked on yet. And so that would require some additional steps to get it up to the surface and be able to be worked on. But really, that leads into a whole process of tapping. And so a little bit of a visualization technique. And through that, we can resolve some of these traumas. Which is very powerful. And like I said, you know, about 80% of issues in the physical really come from these upper layers. So if there's a psychological trauma that's happened on the 3rd or 4th level, resolving that before it's manifested into a physical thing is going to be important. And we can check any of these things against. We can put one thing in reference to another thing. So and that's called 1 or 2 point or 2 or 3 pointing. So we could take out this MSM, which would, when we're looking at the teeth, right, that's showing stress. So this is stress state right now. We could see there's ways that the body understands. Again, I don't understand the mechanics of this, but we can see, is this what pads of the fingers together and the teeth. So this is 2 points of reference. I'm touching the teeth and she's holding this and hold. Okay, that does not create a change. So it was already stressed by me touching. This does not create a change. So this is second point of reference. We're seeing if the second point changes the first. Okay, so when her fingers are together like this, and I'm touching the tooth, that changes the test, which is interpreted to mean that they're correlated. Now, these are called mudras when you're touching different parts of the hand together. We can ask the body questions. So this, with the index finger and the thumb, means, is this a physical issue? This means, is it a nutritional issue? Is it an emotional issue or an electrical problem? And so we can narrow in on what's going on with the teeth. This is a nutritional issue for teeth. So that makes sense that the MSM worked, because this is working on a nutritional basis. And we could look at foods that may support that. Oftentimes with the teeth, it'll be a pathogen or something else. Teeth are wired up into all of the meridians of the body, so it could very easily be an electrical issue also. It's just what the body is saying and then going down that path, whatever the body is saying. So I think at this point, I've demonstrated everything that I plan to. I guess what I would see is, are there any questions that would require demonstration to clarify?
Let's have a look. Just thought a quick mention now. At the very beginning, I said a few names of famous people that you have worked with in the past. Can you guess which one of those is watching us now? Well, I'll make it easy for you. He's been around he's been in the natural health field for a great number of years.
Well, all of these people have been.
Yeah. He's a very pleasant guy, very amiable. He helps a huge amount of people out. He's got his own news groups. He's got his own.
Is it Dr. Loyd?
Yes. We're blessed to have him with us now. So thank you very much for being online, Dr. Richard Loyd. It's fantastic to have you with us. Let's have a look at the questions that have been asked. Now, a question was asked by Bev. Can you use a photo instead of a slide
Yes.
of the pathogen or other things?
Yes.
It's really the sky's the limit.
It's amazing that the body can recognize. Something that still blows my mind. I have no idea how this works, the mechanics of it, but I've tested different pathogens. So like I have a slide of the Ehrlichia, but I could literally write the word Ehrlichia on a piece of paper and put a signal enhancer on top of that, and then the body responds the same way. It really does boggle my mind how that works, but I take the signal enhancer off, test, and there's no stress. Put the signal enhancer on top of a handwritten word, and it responds with stress. So again, it's one of those things where I have no idea the mechanics of it, but I'm far more practical in the sense that I don't necessarily care how it works. I love to know how things work, but if I can't figure out how it works, I'm okay with moving forward knowing that it does work. Some people will throw the baby out with the bathwater if they can't figure out how it works, right? And I think that's silly, because there's so much of science that is so complex that no human mind can comprehend the depths of some of these things. So, yeah.
Bev asks the question, can a similar technique be used to test foods, cleaning solutions?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I'll do normally in this is not a typical session, but I got a lot of like typical allergies, or allergens, I should say. So yes. We can see, go ahead and put your arm up. Hold. So we've got a relaxed state here. Now I can put these allergens, which are, you know, things like gluten, dairy, and we can put that on the signal enhancer, and we can check to see whether any of these things cause a stress in the body. None of these are testing as something that is causing a severe reaction that her body can't deal with. So we can test foods that way, absolutely.
Okay.
Anything that blocks the regulation, just go. Those are the things that are really difficult to. If they're continuously in the diet, you're continuously building a wall up. Your body is building that wall up against those foods, and it can be really difficult to achieve healing when your body is fighting your food, which is not supposed to be your medicine. So,
absolutely. Bev asks a question, for people who can't be muscle tested, can you use an oscilloscope to see how the resistance in the body changes? I think it's sort of like a multi-pronged question, because you can't use an oscilloscope to measure resistance. But I think what Bev is asking is, A, are there people that can't be muscle tested? And B, if so, can some other means be used?
So everybody can be muscle tested. Now, it may well be that someone has tried to be muscle tested before, and the person muscle testing has said, you're not tested. Well, first of all, it's a lie. And second of all, really what's happening is they have blocked regulation. The person who's being tested has blocked regulation. And most muscle testing systems are not checking to see whether regulation is open. So if we took all of these things out of the equation, all of the remedies, all of the frequencies that may be helping her, and we tested that ehrlichia, which we know is a stress now, but if we were to put that on the signal enhancer or give a physical sample of it to her body without checking that her regulation is open, it's just going to be a strong arm all day long, because her regulation is not open. It's just got this massive wall that is built against everything. And so putting something good on there, putting something bad on there, all looks the same, all manifests as a strong muscle. And by not first looking at regulation, you miss a lot of different problems. So everybody can be muscle tested. It's just up to the interpretation and having the knowledge that first regulation needs to be established in order to make it work.
Right.
Second, and this is a strange thing, but let me just demonstrate it. So go ahead and put your arm up. I'm going to have you just go ahead and hold. So this is relaxed state. I'm going to have her make a truthful statement. Say, my name is Tina.
My name is Tina.
Okay, so that did not put her body into a state of stress. We've got the pull filter on. She's supposed to be relaxed. So, and making that statement did not put her body into a state of stress. Now, this is one of the things that I've been doing more recently, especially with COVID. No one wants to leave their home. No one wants to go anywhere, or you can't go anywhere. So how do you get tested, right? So spooky users who are familiar with using nails, right? So I use nails in all the generators with remote. But here's something interesting. We take a nail study, we put that onto the signal enhancer. Go ahead and make the statement, my name is Tina.
My name is Tina.
Now there's stress. Her body says, I'm not Tina. When she made that statement previously, when I take this off, my name is Tina.
My name is Tina.
Her body is relaxed. As soon as I put somebody else's nail, say, my name is Tina.
My name is Tina.
Goes into a stressed state. Say, my name is Tim.
My name is Tim.
So she, right now, is Tim. And we can use this to remotely muscle test people, which is amazing. Because, again, the mechanics of it, I have no idea. But it's very exciting because the implications of this is you could test somebody on the other side of the world with a DNA sample. I would still need a person to act as kind of like the proxy. But using this, we can do pretty much all of what we've demonstrated today remotely. And so that opens up to a whole another can of worms. But we can do the same thing. If I got one nail in a generator, another nail on here, we can test through a proxy which frequencies are effective for a person and which ones they're not, even though they're not here. It's pretty wild.
It is absolutely wild. I wonder if that's what Richard does, because Richard does remote testing as well, doesn't he?
I believe Dr. Loyd uses saliva samples very successfully, and yeah.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Thanks for that. Another question is actually one that I could go directly to Tina. Tina, if I can ask if your arm is sore after this session, you've had a lot of.
Getting there, yes.
A little bit, okay. But there was a question.
Definitely something like that. We can switch arms. There's nothing real special about the right arm. It's just most of the time that's something that's preferred just because most people's dominant arm. There's no reason we couldn't use the left arm or any other muscle for that matter. I mean, often when somebody's got like a bum shoulder or something, we could use the leg muscles. The same phenomenon is found within everybody every muscle in the body.
Right. Greg Frostberg asks the question: how does ART address priorities?
Yeah, I understand what he's saying. So the body does have a priority system, and the process that ART goes through starts with the most important, which is regulation. So by going through and checking regulation being opened first, we're automatically starting at the body's highest, the thing that it wants dealt with most. But there is times where you may have, so we found the teeth being an issue, but we could have just as easily found that the teeth and the small intestine and the heart were an issue. All three are testing as an issue. Then we have to go through the process of finding, okay, well, which one of these three is really the main thing that the body wants to have done. And so we use a combination of mudras for that too. There's the K27 bridge, which we use the middle finger and the thumb touching K27 with kidney 27 acupuncture points. So we can hold that, retest. And usually what we'll find is that in that case of 3 organs testing as an issue, we'll find that 2 of those will fall away and 1 will remain. And that is to be interpreted as the priority of the organs. And typically what we see is that when we address that as the priority, when we recheck the other ones, they're gone. 90% of the time, at least, that those other ones are no longer testing as an issue when we address the issue with the priority organ.
Right. Caitlin asks the question, for someone that doesn't have the vials, the CDs, polarizing lens, and the crystalline acrylic, and they've only got the spooky equipment, what can they do to?
Well, you know, it's really interesting question. I'm glad somebody asked that. The body, like I said, produces this polarized light.
Yes.
And so this polarization filter is a tool, but it's not 100% necessary. You can accomplish all of these things using only your own body. And this is nice to have because it frees up a hand. But what we can do, go ahead and put your arm up. So we have no pull filter on here. Well, we'd expect that the arm is strong because this is what would normally be putting her body into that relaxed state. But without that, I can take my hand overstretched. So you want to not just open, but you want to really kind of flex it open all the way. We can put that over any opening of the body, and we see the same thing. As long as, well, the light comes out in this direction. So you want to have that oriented with the body this way. So this way, if you did it like this, it would not work that way. But if you have the overstretched hand over the body, go ahead. Oh, it accomplishes the same thing. As soon as I take this away, go strong again. So we can use the body itself to do all of this. It's just that this makes it handy. It's a crutch, if you will, useful crutch.
Right.
The signal enhancers, yeah, it's a little bit tricky. You could, if you don't have any of these things, you could put them on the body, and it will have an effect. It's just that you lose the amplification that you get with this. And so you don't get quite as clear a signal. I don't know that there's really a built-in way that we can do it without this. You could potentially experiment with different crystalline structures, I suppose. But if you have these, use them. And they're not cheap, but they're also not terrible expensive. I think one of them is about $150. The pull filters, I think, also about $100. But you know, attainable for most people, and they don't wear out, and they don't require power. So it's really, the reason I like this approach is we're combining a really low-tech system built into the human body to analyze what's going on and to see different stressors. But then we can also couple that with the high-tech aspect of, you know, spooky and all those other types of electronic solutions for some of these problems. So,
Right. Have you ever incorporated cold laser in your sessions?
Yeah. So one of the cool things with these is these signal enhancers. They all talk to each other. They, as the light passes through them, you will have noticed that I would have been placing substances right here. I also have another one over here. But this one at the top of her head is where the pull filter has been on. And so these talk to each other. As long as it's in line of sight, you can, these talk to each other. And so the way that we can use that is I could take all of these remedies on the signal enhancer, and I can combine that with another signal enhancer that's been specifically designed for lasers, have no batteries in them. But this one is designed to have a laser that goes through here, and it puts it through a cylinder, and it basically diffuses the light in a horizontal fashion, and we can kind of paint the person with that light, and on that light will be carried all of the information of all of the remedies that are on the signal enhancer. So by doing that, we're giving them almost like a light treatment by beaming the biophotons from the remedies into the field of the person, which then is interacting with their biophoton emissions and cause, basically like taking those things via light. So that's how I normally would incorporate cold laser. Although one of the other things we can use cold laser for is when we're looking at the switching, which is the pinky and thumb tips together. That's neurogenic switching, confusion in the body. Oftentimes, if that's present, that may, like I said, it could be due to a hot tooth, which it was in her case. And it could also often be scars. So scars, we could use the cold laser on them. And there's various different supplements and things like that you could also use for scars. But yeah, that's how I use cold laser.
Fascinating. Now, there's been a few people that have asked this question throughout the course of the summer. I've asked all the questions which are on the technical side, but a lot of people are asking where can they get more information? How can they contact you in particular? Some people know that you're in Seattle and they're wondering if you've got clinics in other cities and other states, and also the hardware, where they can go to get the hardware.
Yeah, so I guess there are three different things there. For the people that want to learn this for themselves, for use for their own families, potentially practitioners that want to incorporate something like this into their practice, or just an individual that wants to learn it for themselves. I think it's an invaluable life skill, to be honest. If I could design the education curriculum, this would be the center point of all health classes. But if you want to learn this for yourself, I've been taught, but I'm not qualified to teach this. And this is just a demonstration of what I've learned. So if you're interested in learning this, you really need to look at Klinghardt Institute. And Dr. Klinghardt teaches this in-person classes. I think that toward the end of this month, they're releasing an online class. It is a few $100s either way, or a few $1,000s if you're doing it in person workshop. But to me, it's worth the investment. For people that are, out of state, not here, I don't have practices elsewhere, but like I said, we can use the DNA sample to remotely test. And then there was one other thing there that I may have missed there, John, I forget.
So we can readdress that, but you've covered where the people can buy the equipment from. That's from the Klinghardt Institute.
Oh, okay. So no. So to buy the equipment,
yes,
you have to go to, there's either, if you're in the US, Discovery Health Solutions is where you would want to get this. Or if you're in Europe, then you would have to go to kiscience.com. Both are or have been affiliated with Klinghardt in his work, and you can get that at kiscience.com for sure, that you can buy this and the pull filter all together. And they even have like a test kit that you can buy, which is pretty handy. It's got little vials of all of the different common toxins, and it comes in a nice, little binder. This is a very comprehensive, or it's where you want to start at, but this will cover many, many different things, and it's a great start.
I wonder if it might be hard to get that past customs. what's in it?
I bought that from Key Science, which is based out of the UK, and I had no problem shipping it to Seattle.
Oh, good. Okay.
I buy actually quite a bit of product from there, because I order it in kind of like in bulk, because some of the remedies for an individual that just needs one remedy, the shipping is kind of crazy when you're just buying one remedy.
Absolutely.
So I try to buy in sets of 10 or more, and then just pay the shipping once.
Have you ever made your own vials using Spooky and NUA, Spooky Pulse DMF or Scalar?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. You can make homeopathic vials. You can make vials with radionics. You can, there's nothing real special to the vials. This one, the liposomal melatonin, all I did was buy a little box of little vials and got some liposomal melatonin, put it in here. A lot of these different, all of these I've made my own.
Wow.
Where you just take a capsule, empty it into a vial, and then you just label them. It helps to keep them organized. But yeah, it's super simple. I prefer to create vials of physical things as opposed to radionics, because or just other types of homeopathic things that are purely electronic, because by using a physical supplement or remedy, you're getting the actual biophotons from this substance interacting with the body, versus just like an electrical component of it. So this contains everything about this remedy, which is in this case curcumin. So her body right now is receiving everything that there is in this curcumin versus just the frequency of curcumin. She's only getting a part of that.
Right. I'll ask just one last question. Can people test themselves, muscle test themselves for different remedies, different...
It is possible. However, I don't recommend it. I don't even test myself if I can help it.
Okay.
Because we know ourselves, we know our headspace, we know everything that we're self-biased, basically. And so we can say, well, this is a problem for me, but we're really in denial about it, or it's not a problem for me, but we're really in denial about it. And so it doesn't get picked up as an issue. And so self-testing usually is done with the hands. So you would use a combination of fingers in the shape of a ring. Typically, it's called the O-ring test. Again, not qualified to teach this, but in practice, it basically looks like if I try to separate my fingers like this, I'm strong, but as soon as I start using two fingers, I go weak. So the way that we can self-test, I could put something like, I know curcumin is one of my big things. I'm standing in front of this signal enhancer, so it works just for me, same way it does for her. And I can test two fingers while this is on the signal enhancer just in front of me, and I gain strength. Whereas when this is off here, two fingers does not hold strong. And so there is a process of learning how much resistance needs to be applied. Definitely not something I would recommend that somebody do for anything super meaningful. Like if you're having to make real decisions on your own health, you do it in a pinch, but don't rely on it. I don't rely on my own testing on my hands because I am just too biased. If I do need to test myself, what I'll do is I'll put my nail on the signal enhancer and have somebody else test, because at least then their muscle strength, they're not in my head. They don't know my biases. And so it's going to be a much more, you're separating yourself from the problem by doing that. And so that's why I don't like muscle testing on self, but it can be done, and with enough training and keeping your mind clear, you can definitely, it's a valid test when done properly and when you're remaining unbiased.
Fantastic. Well, Tina, you've done a fantastic job there too. You've made it so much easier for Brad to demonstrate what are actually quite complex concepts, aren't they? It's truly something you can't explain just in words. You've got to actually see it,
Yeah.
And, to explain it properly. But that was it's absolutely amazing what you've shown us. What is possible. It's really opened up our eyes. Now, quite recently, Spooky has DNA frequencies now, and they've been proven to be quite good. You've found a way that you could possibly refine a factor that's used in the frequencies. Can you just quickly go through that to explain to people how you can...
A little bit of a manual process. I don't know that I can demonstrate. I could certainly explain it. I could kind of recreate the experiment. So we could take for example, the frequency of, or the Ehrlichia, right? We found that, well, we didn't have the DNA frequencies for the Ehrlichia. Let's do this. Let's see if we can find a DNA frequency for the toxoplasma. Go ahead and put your arm up. So again, you can leave that there. Pole filter's on, hold. Okay, so she's in a relaxed state. We're going to put the CD with the signature of the toxoplasma on here and hold. Okay, she goes into a stressed state. If I put the ivermectin on, it erases that stressed state, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we want to just look at the frequencies and what they're contributing. So we're going to take ivermectin out of the equation, and we're going to look at frequencies for toxoplasma, and let's see if we can use some of the DNA ones. Okay, so awesome. We have a lot of DNA frequencies for Toxoplasma gondii. So this is actually an important thing to point out, right? So we have, what's that, 6 different programs for Toxoplasma gondii, and each one of these contains up to 20 frequencies, if I understand correctly, John. It looks like yes. 1 hour per. So, so we got 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, and then 1. So all of those combined, it's unlikely that she has all of the different strains of Toxoplasma gondii. We need to find out which one first she has. So let's see if we can also use muscle testing. This is more of a mental test. It's not as accurate, but it can work because we are very connected on another plane where we're all connected to all information, which Robert Sheldrake refers to as the morphic field. But are the frequencies that you need in this program? Are they in this one? Okay, so let's see what happens in here. Okay, so now we have 20 different frequencies that could potentially be beneficial for her and cancel out the stress of this Toxoplasma gondii. And go ahead and hold. Oh, all I do is I put I think that you guys can't see the cursor, but I just highlight one of these frequencies and then I use basically the down arrow on the keyboard to select different ones. So these are all showing as a stress. So this is, it can become very tiring to the arm. Okay, so here on step 15, we find a program or a frequency that relieves that stress. So previously, and then all of these other frequencies did nothing to cancel out the stress of the Toxoplasma that she has, but this one does. So now what we can do is, and this, I don't know that I'll be able to, I can explain it, I don't know that I'll be able to actually demonstrate it, just because, John, if you want to fix something, while transmitting molecular weight frequencies, the frequency adjustment doesn't work. So
it actually does. It actually does. But it does work, but because it's being reduced by so many harmonics.
I've tried with very big numbers.
Yeah. Okay.
And, oh, I guess it is there. Look at that.
It is. Okay. It's because it's being divided so many times that small changes.
Okay. Okay. Well, then maybe we can do this. So what I'll do is we'll zero this out, kind of bring this to center. We know that this is working for her. So it releases that stress. But what we can do is we can adjust the frequency basically by turning it up. I don't know that we'll be able to get out of range here. Hold. Oh, look at that. Okay, so at this point, this frequency, it brought it out of resonance. So this is no longer taking the signature or the stress of this parasite. The frequency is no longer taking this out of resonance. So then what we can do is we can bring this back closer to where center was, and we see that it is taking it out. So then it's basically a matter of playing with the frequency, finding the upper limit of what will or eliminate the stress of this, and then doing the opposite, finding the lower limit. And then theoretically, right in the middle there is where you would have the most effective frequency to take this out of resonance.
Right.
And so you can, that's what I did to actually modify the default molecular weight to Hertz factors and base pair factors in the spooky software.
Fascinating. And as I said in the beginning, actually, is before you came on board, Brad, you've been a contributor to Spooky for a long time, a scientific contributor, and making suggestions that have made Spooky better, and everyone has benefited as a result of that. So we've all got Brad for doing
We can
his
do
part.
without you, John.
Well, that's been an amazing summer. I kind of expected something quite good, and it didn't. It exceeded my expectations. It was brilliant. I've never had someone that's explained, and you've explained it very well too, Brad. Muscle testing in general, applying the ART method, and there's just so much for me now to go home and think about. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time, John, and having me on here. It's been a privilege and honor.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you've made an impact on a lot of people's lives. Now, how can people contact you directly? What's the best way?
So my website is cornerstonecodes.com. One word, no dashes or spaces. Cornerstone, common spelling codes. And so the way that this is structured is Dr. Loyd, I thank you for the pattern, which I kind of borrowed / stole from you.
Yeah, well, Richard was the first in just about everything, wasn't he?
But this is structured as a membership association. So anybody that wants to get tested first go through a membership application process, which is simple, and that can be started on my website. And there's like you said in my background, I've got a background in software development, so I've tried to automate as much of that. So there's like an e-sign process, a document that you would get and sign digitally, and that kind of kickstarts the whole process, and then we can look at setting up a session. But cornerstonecodes.com is the main way to get hold of me.
Fantastic. Well, people have seen you in action. They now realise, I guess, that you are an expert in the field. You've obviously been doing it for a long time, and you've also been digging deeper. You want to find out more and more, and gosh, it's been. I used to think it was quite something simple, but there's just so much involved, and the fact that putting the polarizing filter inverts the biofeedback, because all the muscle testing I've been shown to date have been a reduced resistance for stress, but you are inverted, and I was wondering about that, and then you explained about the polarization, and it all makes sense. It was amazing.
And you know, something that becomes really difficult when you're looking at that other way of muscle testing, right? Where you start out with a strong arm, and you test, say you put mercury into a system, the arm goes weak, that's interpreted as a bad thing, which it is.
Yes.
But say you take a good remedy, like a good general thing is chlorella, that's great for almost everybody, could benefit from that.
Right.
And you start out with a strong arm. Well, what's going to happen? Your strong arm stays strong. That doesn't really tell you a whole lot of information, right? So being able to start in a weak state and then find something to flip that gives you much more valid information. All we found by making a strong arm to a strong arm means that it's not bad for you, but you don't know if it's beneficial at all. It could be neutral.
Yes.
It could be. But yeah, that's why this system is definitely, I feel like a much more mature muscle testing system. because I've studied the others. I started with the others, and I just wasn't satisfied. So.
Right, right. Well, absolutely brilliant. I'm struggling to find the words to explain just how well I'm very, oh gosh, what, there are no words, but I was blown away with what you've shown us, Brad. I really was. That was good. And Tina, thank you so much for your patience in being a patient, if you excuse that awful sentence structure. No, I'd like to thank you both for spending time, contributing time tonight, and showing how A.R.T can be applied to improve one's health, how to find out what the problem issues are, and also how to resolve them. And Brad, I'd like to also extend a thank you for the help you've given over the years to Spooky. You've been a very active contributor. I'd like to thank you for that as well. Well, that concludes episode 149 of SAMA. It's been a good one. It's been a fantastic one with good participation as well. And we've got Richard Loyd, the man, as well, watching, and hopefully he'll come on one day. We can do one for him. With him. But no, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it's been of a benefit to you. I hope you're now all sort of scratching your heads and thinking, gosh, I think I can do that. I think I can learn more. It's called empowerment.
It does not require any special skill.
Right.
Anybody can learn it. It might take you a little bit to get the hang of it, but definitely a life skill worth learning.
The reason Spooky has been so successful is because people have been realizing that they can become empowered. They don't need to pay money for things. They can actually do things themselves, or be more knowledgeable to make the better decisions for themselves. Because ultimately it's you that worries more about your health rather than a trained medical professional. But there are exceptions. I mean, you, Brad, you obviously put your heart in that. You'll be wondering tonight as you're lying in bed, oh, I hope, Tina's okay, and worrying about other people that you're taking care of. I know Richard Loyd's the same. I've seen him put in a huge amount of hours to people that are unwell to get them, to keep them above ground. Good people like the people that we have here now are the people that I like to support. So thank you once again, Brad, for your time, and thank you, Tina. Okay, well, that concludes episode 149 of SAMA. Gosh, next one's 150. I'll see if I can postpone it for a couple of weeks. I've been a bit lazy, actually. I had a couple of weeks off. I just needed a break. Well, we had so many other things, a few family emergencies and things, but we're past them now. And so now we're back into normality. So goodness knows who we're going to have next week. I don't, Brad's left huge shoes to fill. I feel sorry for the next person, but let's hope that it's okay. I shouldn't say that, should I? But no, Brad, it really was a fantastic SAMA. Well, take care, everybody. Keep on passing the love forwards, and I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.